There are claims some Territory truckies are driving for up to 28 hours straight. That's 13 hours more than the national maximum. But it's legal here, as the NT is the only place in the country where driving hours aren't regulated, reigniting calls for a change in law.
An all too familiar sight on Northern Territory roads, and according to the Transport Workers Union, it's far more dangerous for a truckie to be on the road here than it is in any other place in Australia, because the Northern Territory doesn't regulate driving hours.
You're 4 times more likely to be involved in a road accident in the Northern Territory. So of course the ongoing effect of that is more deaths and accidents on our roads.
Jeremy Sholashinsky is one of the lucky ones. He works for Toll, which caps driving shifts at 14 hours, but he knows what can happen if a driver works for too long.
My uncle actually died when I was 8 years old behind the wheel of a truck, being forced to do too many hours behind the wheel. I believe he was actually on his second straight trip when the accident occurred and the truck rolled and he ended up dying.
The National Heavy Vehicle Regulator has set driving hours for every state and territory in Australia except for Western Australia and the Northern Territory. In WA, they operate under their own regulation, with drivers forced to stop after 17 hours. In New South Wales, it's capped at 15.5, but here there are no limits.
More than 24 hours, up to 28 hours in one go.
It's those claims which has prompted the TWU to call for national regulations to be adopted in the NT. But the Northern Territory Transport Association, which helped develop the Fatigue Management Code of Practice in place now, says there is no evidence that fatigue is an issue and the current system gives drivers flexibility.
It allows individual drivers to determine their limits and to recognise their own personal warning signs of fatigue and to drive to the conditions as well.
This isn't the first time there's been calls for trucking hours in the Territory to be regulated. In 2001, Deputy Coroner Elizabeth Morris called for an overhaul of fatigue management within the industry after holding an inquest into the death of truck driver Corey McConville, who had fallen asleep at the wheel. She said the voluntary code of conduct should be replaced with a compulsory and strictly audited system. But 14 years later, the government is sticking to its guns.
What would happen, for instance, if you've got a truckload of cattle that are on their way to market and you get to where the driver has to stop and they've got to pull off on the side of the road? What happens to all those animals?
It's ruled out bringing in laws to regulate driving hours. Elizabeth Creasy, 9 News.